Radiotochka. С вас и Гоше.
Привет на всички! Преди да пуснем първия епизод на Радиоточка 2 на английски език, искам да споделя малко мисли относно развитието на големите проекти на малката точка 2. И всъщност искам да изкажа огромната благодарност, която нашия екип има към компаниите, IT компаниите, с които си партнираме, защото в тях виждаме истински партньори. Компании, в които не просто гледат да се позиционират някъде, а напротив, грижа ги е за това как се развиват IT хората в България и как те да могат да работят по-добре заедно. И всъщност тук, първо благодарим на Цулке, които станаха първия осиновител на хапче на softskillspills.com платформата. Хапчето за даване на обратна връзка, която супер си пасва с културата на Цулке, където много държат на хората и на отворената комуникация. И всъщност това да даваш обратна връзка при тях е в основата на благоприятната им среда. Ако не сте пробвали хапчето, отидете на softskillspills.com и също така не забравяйте да се абонирате на сайта, защото може да получавате полезна информация на мейла си. Също така много се радваме и на това, че SMS Bump ни помага да развиваме и откъсите на Радиоточка 2. Тези от вас, които ни следят в YouTube канала или в LinkedIn, могат да видят какви откъси от подкаста пускаме. Аз много се радвам, че се запознах на живо с Мишо от SMS Bump, който имаше презентация на тук-там събитието миналата седмица. И някакси много ме вдъхнови, че българска компания може да прави супер яките неща на световно ниво. Ако не познавате SMS Bump, това е наистина компания, в която можеш да се забавляваш, да правиш продукти, които се използват просто на глобално ниво от уникални компании. Даже наскоро това, което се случи миналата седмица, мисля, че беше Shopify и Yotpo, която купиха SMS Bump миналата година. Shopify и Yotpo обявиха това, че стават партньори в изграждането на една платформа за e-commerce, така че SMS Bump като част от Yotpo се развива супер бурно. Ако ви е интересно, може да разгледате отворените позиции там. И не на последно място, предния петък беше супер яката емоция, която си направихме с IT Teams Challenge, инициативата, която стартирахме с Ford България. Беше един ден изпълнен наистина с много емоция, където играхме, където си говорихме за супер интересните казуси, с които всеки един от вас се среща. И просто инициативата за мен беше супер успешен. Всъщност това беше пилотната версия. Екипа не успя да ни победи с играта Празния стол. 58 секунди при цел 60, но бяха уникална група от хора, което някакси е свързано и с културата в Форд и нашата култура на точка 2. Паснаха си хора, които умеят и да се учат и да се забавляват. Това е май всичко, което се сещам в момента. Гледайте да се включите по всякакъв начин в всичките ни инициативи. Мисля, че ще са ви изключително полезни. Имаме идеи как да развиваме още Facebook групата Soft Skills за IT хора, така че може да се включите там, ако сте IT хора, които се вълнувате от Soft Skills. Не забравяйте наистина да се абонирате за подкаста ни в удобните платформи в YouTube, просто има и откъси, иначе съм сигурен на мобилните ви приложения, че сте го направили. Много ще се радваме на всякаква обратна връзка, да ни пишете и приятно слушане на епизода с Ричард, където ще преминем на английски език.
Hello everyone, you're with Radiotochka 2. With me, Harry, we are without Vasi, as she's on a maternity leave, and today with our special guest, special because we are going to do it in English, Richard Haywood. Hi, Richard.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm great. It's a Friday afternoon, as we mentioned during the conversation before we hit the record button. So hopefully I'll put a lot of energy in the conversation. It's more on at noon at your place, right? You're currently in
yeah,
UK.
it's like 2 o'clock, so it's not too bad.
So I expect a lot of energy from you. So Richard, we briefly talked what we are going to speak today, and we decided it will be something around psychological safety, so that people can try out new roles. As I usually mention during the podcast, we have some focus, but we'll see what happens, what we talked about afterwards. So we'll name the episode afterwards. So why are you interested in this topic about the psychological safety of people trying new roles?
I think there's a couple of parts. And it sort of comes back to what sort of Jim Collins calls like having the right people on the right seats of the bus. And I think, trying to build a leadership team or a team in general, it's about getting the right people with the right skills. And I think there's a few sort of different elements to getting those right people. One is you want people who are enjoying the role. They get into a role that they enjoy, that they get into the sort of how it works, they're enjoying it, they're getting value out of it, and fulfillment. And then there's sort of the second element, which is actually getting the people who would be good at that role that space to try things out and to actually take things on. And so one of the things that we've tried in the past is by putting in things like sort of assignments or a period of time where people can sort of try out a role, see if it's the right thing for them. And many occasions people have this vision of this role or this job, and when they actually get into it, it's completely different. And I think this is a bit of an interesting challenge. And this has the other side, which is that those people who don't know that that's the role that they'd be great at don't even think to apply. And so those are sort of part of the reasons that I think giving people a way to try out a role before sort of taking it permanently is actually really beneficial both to the individual and to the company.
Yeah, one aspect I'm thinking about as an example, when I was a software developer, at some point I was basically given the opportunity to lead a small team. Mm-hmm. And I was open to trying out this. And for the first 2 years, basically, because I started working with one team, then another team, and I think this happens usually when you take a new role that, let's say, might not be perfect for you. You don't just quit, you try at least a lot. I think a lot of times you try a lot in terms of time. And after 2 years struggling, because my job was basically managing people, not doing any coding, at some point I said to myself that actually now like working in this role, because usually during these 2 years it was I want to code and I don't want to deal with people. But at some point I basically realized that I love solving people-related issues because they are more complex than the software issues. And I think there are, let's say, nuances regarding what's the time frame. How do you try out a new role? And I don't know if you have this experience that you were trying a role and you say, okay, it might not be the one for me. But when do you? What's the, let's say, the border? Where do you say, okay, it's not for me, really?
That's a really interesting question. I don't have a good answer to it. But that was definitely how I felt when I started being as a software engineer. Straight out of university, working in a company, I was like, oh, this is awful. And then you sort of get into it, and you realize that it's funny, it's interesting. So I can definitely empathize with that challenge. I don't have a solution to it, but definitely I think there are quite a few people who do take on new roles and probably don't enjoy it at the beginning because you've got to learn how to do it. It's different to what you expected, and so yeah,
for me, when we started Tochka 2, the company, and when we focused on basically our idea was to do trainings with teams and IT people. And what happened was that we should do sales, marketing, administrative stuff, and those are things that some of them I still hate. But one aspect, for example, the marketing aspect was something that I started to love because I found my way in doing this type of job. And one thing is really how do you how do you, let's say, manage people that they have some barriers to enter a new role? Because I've seen a lot of technical people where you see that they care about people, so they have they tend to lead when they are not asked. So they have all the qualities, the role qualities to become a great leader. But when you ask them, would you like to take a role, and they are, okay, no, I don't want too much pressure or too much responsibilities and so on. And I've seen some of those people that they become great managers, great leaders. But it's quite a discussion before they try out this.
Yeah, and I think it's the case that, you know, you need to be mindful of different people's, like, you know, those sort of pushing them a little bit too far. Because it's definitely the case where if you were to push somebody who you could see has a natural aptitude for something, and you push them into a leadership role too soon, they're probably going to either hate it or, and they might never do it again. So it's a really interesting one, that one. How do you give people that sort of push? And I think this is what a good manager, a good leader should be doing, is understanding the skills and the potential that people have and what they're interested in, and sort of giving them opportunities and pushing them and sort of helping them. Hey, there's this opportunity to maybe not lead a team, but to lead a particular feature or particular challenges, and say, hey, this would be a great opportunity to sort of try out these things. So I think that's where you need a bit of support from somebody, effectively a coach, to give you that sort of push.
In the past, I assume that you have been in such situations that you see the raw quality and you want to, let's say, push. I would use the nudge word as well. How do you approach this? So you see the person. Do you have such an example in the past?
I definitely have examples. I think it's an interesting one because you can only nudge, as you say, and you can. I actually think this is quite interesting because there are many people who see what you enjoy and what you're good at, but you can't see yourself. They look at you from sort of the outside perspective and going, oh, you know, this person is really good at product. They would be great in a product type role, but they're currently in engineering.
Yeah.
And they're like, I want to be an engineer. I really enjoy engineering. But they're going, but your passion of engineering is actually when you're talking about business problems and sort of those prioritization piece. And so I think it has to be on an individual type basis. There is no one solution to this. It's about working with the individual and, you know, hopefully them working with their manager and going, actually, I realize what I actually enjoy doing. Because that's that sort of combination that's good for everybody.
I remember a colleague of mine, he was in my team, who was a quality assurance engineer. And we were having a discussion, part of the formal feedback process. And basically, he was saying that the quality assurance aspect, it's not that interesting for him. And he was more eager to basically build the software so that the user can really experience aspects of... so basically was interested in the user experience role. But he didn't know anything about it. So he had the interest but no knowledge. And I remember during this conversation I said, okay, let's explore this topic more. We discussed it, and I talked to the UX manager in the company, and I asked whether we have some let's say opportunity to try out things really for a time-based trial. And then because even I was not I didn't have the knowledge what type of roles there are in UX.
Yep.
And at some point we said, okay, let's try. It was a 50-50 split between the QA role in the project and doing some UX in other parts, in other projects. And this was an attempt to do it in a, let's say, psychological safe way. And what happened was basically the person then progressed, and really the UX was some interesting part for him, and not the visual aspect, but the information structuring aspect. And he found what was interesting for him. But yeah, as we already mentioned, you cannot, you can have some ideas what the role would be, and you have to give some opportunities to try out things. And I don't know whether a lot of people that have the let's say the control managers give those opportunities, because I think they are scared as well. What will happen if this person fail?
Yeah, I think that's part of that. That's definitely a risk. But the point that you just made a second ago is a really interesting one with regard to like the annual sort of review, because I think a lot of people see it as like sort of evaluating about setting targets for the next year. But the point you've just given is exactly what they should be in my mind, which is that conversation about where do you want to go, where do you want to see yourself? Okay, how can we help you with those opportunities? And I think sometimes we miss that opportunity to have those type of questions because we get focused on, you know, some sort of document that we have to complete. Or I remember I've not had like a annual performance review for a long time, but back in the day when I had one, we spent ages like writing down what I was going to do over the next year. Yeah. And within 6 weeks, the whole thing was just ripped up, and it was like we're doing something completely different now. So I think that's a really interesting point for people to think about. What is the value of those reviews? And actually, how do you help people sort of achieve their best?
Yeah, and I think just to put more emphasis here, I think more and more people should have continuous conversations rather than some strict time-based following of goals and checking those goals, evaluating those goals.
Yes, I would just. I think one of the challenges you sometimes get with like continuous conversations is people think that they're having that conversation, but actually they're just forgetting it. And so I think you do need a couple of checkpoints, whether that's like once a year, once every 6 months, or quarterly, because I think it's very easy for people to go, oh, we always have those conversations about like personal development and career development. And the manager thinks, oh yeah, but that's in like every one-to-one. We always talk about this, but actually from the employee's perspective, they don't have that special time to talk about this. So I think you're spot on. You want it to be much more regular, but I think you do need to set aside some time to actually, we are going to talk about personal development, maybe in this one-to-one or maybe once a quarter, however you want to do it.
Yeah, to see the bigger picture, to evaluate the bigger picture. And I had a recent conversation with a senior engineering manager, and we were discussing, let's say, some topics about how to guide the leaders in his teams. And one aspect was that I asked, what do you talk about during one-on-ones? And I think what you're saying is right. During one-on-ones, people tend to think they're talking about this development, but they go a lot on the operational level and
exactly
what are the current tasks, what we should do regarding those current tasks, and we should map it to the goal. But it's not okay. Let's step aside and just. And I think what we already mentioned is for the person to say where he wants or she wants to go to the. To progress, but also the manager where he sees those raw qualities and what could be the opportunities. And I think from a manager's perspective, I think people they're quite, let's say, their brains are filled, they're quite busy, and they don't have space in their minds regarding these topics. And how do you do your one-on-ones? So regarding this topic, how do you do this?
Regarding this topic, 2 different one-to-ones. So operational one-to-ones every week or more frequently for certain sort of things that are going on. And it's not supposed to be a progress update. It's supposed to be more of a, what are the challenges? What can we help you with type thing? And then from the sort of what I describe as non-operational one-to-ones, we're trying to work out what the best frequency is of this. We've got them in the diary once a month, but probably I think once a quarter would be probably a better use of, not better use of time, that's not what I mean, but in terms of not a lot happens actually on a month-to-month basis. Whereas once a quarter, you can actually go, oh, I want to try this, or I want to do that. And actually a month is a reasonable amount of time once you try and squeeze it in with sort of the regular day-to-day job that people are doing.
And how do you create this psychological safety so that the other person can basically say to you, Richard, I want to try out new things. I know you count on me in this role, and that it will be hard for you to fill my place, but I really want to.
Yeah, I think it fundamentally comes down to your role is for them to succeed. You know, because in a management leadership role, it's the people who actually are the ones that are succeeding. So if the person who reports to you, you can help them succeed, well, that's both good for them and for the organization. So I think you are naturally aligned with what you want, as in terms of you want them to be able to do their best in the company, in an ideal world. And if it's outside the company, then that's also fine. So I think there's a natural alignment there. And it's definitely the case that in some companies where maybe people leaving or people moving is seen as a bad thing, that psychological safety may be a little bit more challenging. But from my perspective, people moving between teams, people moving between departments, that's beneficial for the organization. It spreads knowledge, it spreads experience. So I think if, and this comes down to thinking about more than just your part of the world. If you're thinking about it from what is best for the organization, then I think you are naturally aligned. But it might not be what's best for you personally as a manager.
Yeah, I was thinking about one example when I was an early leader, and I'm following your idea about thinking about the bigger organization. And I had a senior developer in my team. We were 20 people, so he was a work group leader. We split the team in 3 sub-teams. And basically, I saw the talent regarding leading. So he was quite great in leading people, in managing the software that was responsible in his team. But I missed that he wanted something else. And when he said, okay, I want another opportunity, I think it was too late for me to basically say, okay, let's check other projects, other departments, something other. And this is one aspect. So missing those signs, that's why I asked you how to make sure that people will say it to you. But I think we shouldn't rely on people saying it. We should somehow ask in a safe way. So this is one aspect. And I've seen scenarios where people are saying it. So they are saying, I want another thing. The company is basically saying, okay, we'll try to look out for something, but actually it's not that effective in doing it, or is trying to see how much really the person wants to change the roles. And even I've seen scenarios where the company will say, we don't have another opportunity. So the person might say, okay, I'm leaving then. And then the company will say, oh, now we can look out for some more opportunities, which is, I think, a dreadful scenario, but this is something I have seen happens. So how to balance those? I really don't know how to balance those discussions between the person and the company, so that you give the opportunity and you don't change that often, those roles, because it's not effective for the company. If we think about changing a lot of the roles, I think it's not okay.
But I think there's a piece with regard to, if people are in a team and they're creating valuable products, they tend to, I think sometimes we actually have the problem where people don't want to move enough. I think right now we're in a bit of a state of flux, but I think quite a lot of people, when they're in a team that they like, then they're working on really nice products, then I think actually sometimes you can get the opposite problem as well, which is that people don't want to move, and you're not sharing that knowledge between teams. So it's definitely a balance.
Yeah, regarding the not wanting to move, I think this is related to even how do you nudge people to move? Because you're mentioning that this is something that you consider a good thing from your perspective, but in order for people to accept it as a good thing, you should somehow communicate it.
Well, I don't think it's about communicating. I think it's about people seeing it. I think if people see people moving between teams, they'll realize that it's both an option, but also something that is, people do what they see as opposed to what they hear. I can tell you can do this. You can do X, Y, and Z, but they're always going to be a little bit reticent until they actually see people doing it and go, that person's just done this, and I want to, okay, well, I could do that in the future. So I think it's about it's
showing the
yeah, practicing what you preach.
Okay, I have one learning in the past that I was with that perspective that you should actually practice, and it's not that important to communicate it. But at some point, I saw that it is again a balance that you should actually do it and communicate it, because if you don't communicate it and expect people to see it,
Yes.
it could lead to miscommunication actually. So yeah, so I think we should communicate as well somehow. Before we started, we mentioned that in some aspect, changing a role is related to confidence. But as we mentioned, psychological safety, a psychological safe environment should allow people without the confidence to actually do the action. So, what are your thoughts regarding the confidence part in this changing of roles?
Well, when we sort of kicked off the conversation, one of the things we were talking about was sort of maybe things like sort of assignments or sort of opportunities for people to try out roles. And I've definitely seen where there is an opportunity to try things out. People are more, you don't need to be as confident to apply for the role as if it is like a full permanent position. And so I think that definitely helps people who are a little bit less confident to get into the role. And then once they've been in the role and they've actually tried out, then their confidence does improve, whether if they enjoy doing the role. So that definitely helps.
So to frame it like a trial period or something like that, or as an opportunity, or what?
Yeah, to phrase it more as an opportunity, and for maybe the default for them to have their previous role to be able to go back to, because sometimes you can get into a position where people don't want to apply for a role because they know that if they do that, they might not be able to go back to where they were.
Okay.
And so they have the sort of the confidence threshold, sometimes can be a little bit higher and go, well, if I'm going there, I'm going to lose what I have at the moment. Actually, I'm comfortable. I quite like what I'm doing at the moment. And so having that way for them to go back actually then means that they can be, okay, well, the risk is less. And so actually, I maybe don't need to be as confident that this is exactly what I want, but I am confident enough to give it a try for the next 3 or 6 months.
And how do you deal with overconfidence? Because there are times where people are too confident that they're great for the role. And for example, you might not agree.
Yes.
Do you have examples in those cases? How do you deal with those situations?
I think overconfidence is probably the area that I most struggle with people, where people think that they're much better than they actually are. And I'm sure you're aware of like the Dunning-Kruger curve.
Yeah.
Where the confidence and competence are not related.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really tough one. And I think it's very much dependent on the individuals and how you deal with that and how you work with them. And, helping them realize the bits that they don't realize or the bits that they don't know. Actually, they can then open up and go, actually, there's so much I didn't know. And it's great. But there's definitely another group of people which are overly confident. They're in a role. And, the more time you put into them, you actually you're not getting anywhere. And so I think one of the things you should be looking for when promoting people is like what they might describe as coachability. Because that's probably the best way to be able to sort of help people sort of through that.
So if you think they're not coachable, what would you do? In those situations where people say, for example, I'm a senior software engineer, have been a senior software engineer for the past 3, 4, or 5 years, and I want to take a leadership role, and I come to you and I want to be promoted, and you think that I'm not going to be a good manager, or what? How would you approach this?
It depends on the individual specific case. I think with the example that you've just given, I think the stepping stone of them maybe leading not a team as such, but maybe a sort of an initiative or some other thing, to give them a little space where maybe they do have a couple of people report to them informally for a period of time while they're doing some piece of work. That could be a good way to sort of give them a bit of an opportunity and to be able to maybe give them an opportunity to get some feedback and see the differences. So I think it's very sort of dependent on the individual specific situation and the individual person.
And what happens if a person says, I'm doing a great job? I'll give an example from my past, and I'm thinking about how do you approach it. I had it was actually a junior engineer who basically wanted a salary increase. He didn't want any new roles or something like that. He wanted a salary increase, and he was saying, I'm doing a great job. And a few weeks before that, we had a specific session to show how the quality of his code wasn't great, and that he should do steps 1, 2, 3 regarding the improvement of the way he's doing his job. And he wasn't following this plan, but then wanted the increase. And he said he was doing a great job, actually. So he had the understanding that he's doing a great job, but he wasn't doing a great job. And I think in regarding the desire for career development, you might have such situations where people don't have the right understanding of their own performance. And how do you approach those?
Yeah, I think there's another piece that you've just touched on there as well, which is with regard to sort of recognition and appreciation. And the simple solution is more money, as in terms of, if I don't feel that I'm being recognized or I'm being appreciated, sometimes people find that really struggle to like verbalize and express and explain that they're missing something in their job. But the thing that they can express very simply is, I'm worth more, you should give me more money. And so
you think when they ask this, they actually don't want the money, but the recognition? Or
it depends. So there's definitely somebody who's coming to money. It's not always this case. It could be the fact that they are genuinely being paid unfairly, and you should fix that. You know, people should be paid fairly. However, it can be the case that it's because they are not receiving recognition or appreciation in some other form. So they're doing work, and they're not feeling that actually what they're doing is valued by the company. And the easy way for an individual to work out their value is unfortunately their salary. But you know, recognition and appreciation is much more than just like the amount of money people get paid at the end of the month.
Yeah, touching a great topic here. I'm not sure it's related to don't believe what people are saying, and those are really a lot of the cases when you don't have the psychological safety we're referring from time to time, is that people will somehow package the communication in other way.
Yeah, I don't think it's just about psychological safety either. I think it's that sometimes people don't themselves know what the problem is, and they don't. I think they know that there is an issue, and they go, I'm going to solve it. The solution is money. But I think sometimes people don't actually realize themselves what the problem is. And there's a colleague who I was working with, and he was basically asking for more money, and then what he realized is that actually he was missing a challenge. And so he was being paid fairly, and there was a big challenge that we had, and it was perfect. So everything came together. There was the money wasn't the issue. The problem was he was sort of missing his space and his problem to be able to go off and work on.
I think, yeah, you're 100% right regarding the solution and the problem aspect. When we work with teams, and we have one workshop where we deep dive in some topics, and so basically the team shares what are the current problems they have, the top problems they have, and we try together to find a solution. And the interesting part is that maybe it's also because we're engineers. When we have a problem, we go to solutions directly.
Yes.
And our structured way in doing this deep dive discussion is when we have the topic, we say, team, let's phrase it as a question, what the problem is here. And it's quite an effort to facilitate people to just frame it as a question, not what to do as an action, as a solution. And yeah, we always say that 50% of the effort should be in actually framing the problem. So you're quite right here regarding the aspect. When someone comes with a solution or asking an increase or asking something, we should first dig what the problem is.
And it's so easy to just come up with a solution. I was caught out just this week where there was a solution to a problem, but actually it was like, okay, we need to actually go a step backwards, and for people to challenge me and go, actually, hold on, why are we doing this? It's so easy to go, oh, we need to do this, without actually going, actually, then everybody else knows way more about this than I do. But it's so easy to come up with a solution by accident.
So yeah, the first aspect shouldn't be whether we should, whether we can do the solution, so increasing money or something like that, but whether we should do it. And in order to understand whether we should do it, is what's the problem, to dig deeper. And I think this is related with the topic of managing expectations, because this is something we do as a training in Tochka too. Is when we have, let's say, either a conflict situation or when we agree on something for the future, to manage each other's expectations. And usually one of the aspects is to frame the problem, to understand the other, what's the issue before going to the solution. And even with the solution, there is I don't know if you're familiar with the spin model. It comes from sales, where the idea is you have, let's say, 4 types of questions to understand the other person's needs. And it basically says that you have a situational type of questions where you understand the context, the problem question where you try to understand what's the problem, the implication questions where you try to understand what the problem leads to, and again, the last type of question is the need payoff question, which is basically to say, for me, this is a solution. Is it a solution for you as well? And when people try to resolve conflicts, and I'm trying to map this thing that we discussed previously, when people try to resolve conflicts and saying, I want this, and the other person saying, I don't want this, I want something else, they try to reach the solution without exploring the needs. And you first have to explore the needs. And one way is basically to ask the other person, is this a solution for you? And if I say to the other person, if I increase you with a certain amount of money, is that okay for you? Yeah, he might say yes, because he thinks that's the problem. And sometimes we will not be able to really understand the needs of the other person because they might not understand their own needs. But we should, there are ways to explore this.
I think there's another one that's interesting that's related to this as well, which is also sort of the cultural implications, as in terms of if the way that people feel that they're getting value is just by asking for a pay rise, getting a pay rise. Actually, they're just going to keep coming back. It's not going to be because you're not solving the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem being the lack of recognition or lack of appreciation, and so it's you're solving you're solving the short-term problem, but you're not solving sort of the systematic problem, which.
That's when you mention cultural things, do you mean on a level of the company culture, or on a level of, let's say, as you're from the UK and from Bulgaria, those type of culture?
Well, I was thinking more on sort of company culture, because if your definition of value is to get more money or to get a bonus or to get that, then you have to continue that, because if you then stop doing that, so this is actually defining what is the value that we're creating, so people can understand that and get recognition and rewarded for that. But that's not by giving people more money. That's about highlighting, getting stuff into production and seeing what the impact on users or those other sort of type of aspects of recognition and value and understanding.
Yeah, I think when we mention culture, I think this is we should focus also on let's say expectation gaps that people have. For example, in my early days in my career, I asked for more money. I was like 3 months in the role of a junior developer, and I thought, okay, I'm not paid fairly. But I compared to a colleague of mine from a different company who was basically, he was in a game development company, and he was basically playing games, really playing games 7 hours a day and fixing some code 1 hour a day, and he was receiving twice the amount of money that I was receiving, and it was not fair for me. So the idea is that my focus here is that we should understand that people have expectations that could come from something outside of us. So if I come in your company, I might have the expectations or the behavior that was based on my previous experiences. Mm-hmm. And I that's why we should communicate the current culture more often.
And there's definitely there's communicating the current culture, but there's also selecting people for which, well, both informing and selecting people. So as part of the recruitment process, you want people who are going to fit into that mm-hmm. culture. So for example, if you've got a culture of collaboration, you don't really want to be hiring sort of lone star heroes, because they're just not going to fit into the culture, and they're not going to be happy. They're not going to feel that sense of achievement. And then once you do hire people, to give them that sort of onboarding and understanding of like, what are we trying to achieve? What is the values? What are the like?
Yeah, definitely. I think recruitment should really be aligned to the whole process here. And I think more and more companies are doing great in that area. Richard, going back to the roles, I'm trying to dig a bit deeper. Have you had experiences where, or what's the worst what's your worst experience in either you changing roles or other people changing roles?
What is the worst? Oh, that's a good question. By saying the worst, I think there's an implication that it's bad, but I don't think that. There's definitely been some occasions where some people need a bit of help and support once they've got into a new role, but that's exactly what you'd expect. I think one of the challenges sometimes is that, and this is especially a challenge when we're working from home or working remotely, is that the separation between, you know, what is produced and how we produce it. And we were talking about culture just a second ago. Mm-hmm. You know, the culture is important. If you've got a team and how they work and how they get along. And I think sometimes with people who are working remotely, they don't see that culture, and that's probably a big challenge, as in terms of the ways of working of the team when you're not physically together.
Yeah, we just today released an episode of the podcast regarding culture, and we covered one part of really how to maintain or communicate or show the culture when you're in a remote environment, and it is a challenge. It is quite difficult to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, because you just miss the osmosis. So if you're in the office, the culture is what you see, what you hear, the things around you, and you sort of understand how it works. But remotely, that's really tough, because if you got like a series of emails or messages on Slack or what have you, you know, that's a very low bandwidth medium. You know, there's an example from like machine learning where there's like one sentence, and you could interpret that one sentence 17 different ways or something weird like that. And you miss all of that other sort of context and other information when you're just dealing with sort of text space. And I think when we're working online, there's a lot of those, there's much more of that than there would be maybe in the office, where you just turn the chair around and have that conversation and have a chat.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking about my question. I don't know if you answered your experiences, so I'm going to switch to my experiences regarding, let's say, the worst situation about changing roles. When I started my career, I started as a developer, but I actually did a second level support in a big project for HP, and I didn't like it because it was not something I wanted. I didn't code anything. I was dealing only with databases, with third level support communication, with customer support, and this was something that I basically dreaded. I didn't want to do it at all. Then I switched to, let's say, an automation QA. So this was closer in terms of development, but it was still not what I wanted. I wanted to build things, not to test things. And during those periods, it was like more than half a year in different roles. I thought that this was a waste of my time. And a few years later, when I was in my leadership roles, I actually looked back and said, wow, I had those experiences in different roles. And it allows me to basically talk to the QAs easily, to talk to the support people easily, and so on, because I have this experience. And this was something, whenever I had a conversation with a person that he's currently in a role he didn't like, I shared my experiences and I said, it is possible that it's not the right thing for you, but we should assess it when you have some more experiences and how they are mapped to where you want to go. Because we had one episode in the podcast regarding whether you should develop your strengths or weaknesses, and we talked that it depends basically, because if developing your strengths, or basically if you are developing your weaknesses, if this is related to your long-term goal,
yes,
then maybe you should develop your weaknesses. But if they are not related, maybe not. So I think this is similar with the roles. What do you think? Do you have you been in a situation where you're in a role, you don't like it, and you realize that it was a great opportunity afterwards?
That's an interesting one, because I think I see everything as a great opportunity.
You're too positive.
In general, so I think whatever you're doing, if you're not seeing it as an opportunity, then you're probably missing something about it, which is interesting or exciting or different or novel, and it might not be the right thing for you for the rest of eternity, but for the next 6-12 months, there are probably things in the role that are interesting and novel. But you maybe do have to look for them a little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah, but if you're too positive, you might miss the desire to change the roles, right?
Maybe. There's definitely disadvantages to positivity as well, as I found, as in terms of a positivity can definitely have the negative impact that everybody sort of doesn't think that you're maybe taking things seriously, or you're maybe think you're not really comprehending the size of the challenge. So everything is both a positive and negative at the same time, so it's definitely something to be mindful of. But if people are enjoying it, then I don't think it really matters whether they change job or not. If they're enjoying it, they're adding value, then that's good for everybody. And I'm sure that people see different opportunities and go, oh, that could be really exciting, oh, that could be really exciting.
Yeah. I want to. I'm trying to picture the different aspects that we already covered, and to see where to deep a little bit more.
We have covered like a lot of topics, like quite varied and broad. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to explore something deeper on those aspects that we covered with maybe with some more examples? Or if you have some questions regarding those aspects that we covered.
None that instantly pop to mind.
Okay. I'm looking at my notes just to try to gather something. I'll go back to the aspect of, let's say, good job versus bad job. So when a person is thinking he has done a great job, but it's not that case.
We seem to be bumping back into like the Dunning-Kruger confidence versus confidence piece again, and I think it's definitely the case that this is from my experience. I think when I think I'm doing things well, then people go, oh, this isn't very good, that's not very good. And you're like, oh yeah, I could have done that better, and I could have done that better. And then there's been the opposite case where I'm like, oh, this is awful, it's a complete disaster. And people go, oh no, this was really good, and that was really good. So I think it's about caring, as in terms of, if you think that you've done a bad job, it's probably because you care about it. And just because you have this vision or think that it's been done badly or could have been done better, you know, other people might have a different interpretation. And I think the key is that whether you think you've done a good job or done a bad job, your assessment is inaccurate. You know, if you think you've done a great job, there's definitely things you could have improved. And if you've done a bad job, there are definitely things that which went well.
You seem to be positive and caring. So I'm wondering, when a person is really doing a bad job and he thinks he's done a great job, how do you approach them? Because
it's a tough one. That's definitely really tough. Ultimately, you know, if you're working in a sort of a team environment, then there's definitely the piece of like the retrospective and how sort of looking back and reviewing, and then those sort of coaching type conversations about, okay, so how could we have done this even better? What could we? Because I think there's if you're there sort of on the sidelines and you're seeing that there's a challenge or a problem, you probably know in the different areas, and to try and ask those questions, because ultimately you can give as much feedback you want to somebody, but if they don't take it on board, if they don't listen, then it's actually completely pointless. So having those conversations and trying to help them uncover how they could have done things better, even if it was great, or even if they think it's done great, how can you then have those conversations and go, okay, so if we were to do this again, what actually is how could we have done it better? How could we have done it faster? How could we have done it, you know, was the level of quality correct? So having those sort of coaching type conversations.
So open-ended questions, focusing on one aspect of improvement.
Yes.
Now, I'll switch a bit out of the engineering world. I'm not sure whether you're a football fan. I've seen you mention some examples of the England coach, but
I thought this was a really interesting one, because one of the things that I found most interesting about that article was the diversity in the sort of the board that they brought together. Because normally what companies do is that they want like reassurance. They want people who maybe have experience or knowledge in a particular area. And what he did is he brought people who had very different experiences, very different opinions. And I thought that was a really interesting approach that quite a lot of people don't take. Quite a lot of people are looking for people who go, yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, you should do that. Whereas he was actually taking the approach of, I want to bring people in who have different people from sport, but people from not sport, people from to try and get that diverse range of opinions, not just I'm going to get an expert. Yeah. Because the expert has a very limited sort of range of knowledge. So I thought that was really interesting as a way to sort of get different input.
But otherwise, are you following football? Because I want to mention something here as a topic.
Not really, no.
Really. Do you know what's happening with, maybe you would know, with Harry Kane? Because I'm a Tottenham fan. He's the captain of the England football squad, and he has been at Tottenham for the past, let's say, 15 years. Yep. And currently he's trying to move out of the club in an interesting way, basically by not showing to training.
Right.
And basically he wants to switch roles. He wants to go to a different company because the company, basically the club, doesn't match his ambitions regarding the results. And I was wondering whether there are right ways to switch roles and bad ways to switch roles, or when you see that you're not happy with the current role, how to approach this. And you might have the limitations. For example, with the football aspect here, he has a contract, 3 more years. He has to honor the contract, but he's doing it, let's say, publicly. And I have a lot of sympathy for the person because he has brought a lot to the club. But those past few days were interesting. And probably when we release the podcast, this episode, we'll have the result whether he stays or goes.
But well, that one seems like a bit of a, you know, if there's any sort of golden handcuff type, then you sort of can definitely end up in a situation where you end up with people who are unmotivated. It sounds like if this isn't the right company, the right role for him, if I was like the manager, I'd be then having conversations because, you know, what's the point of having this person? You're probably paying this person a lot of money, I would suspect. To
Yeah,
not
but
really
he brings
have their
results.
mind.
So even if he wants more and he's ambitious, he's still, let's say, quite well. He's performing, and I've been in a role. I've been in a role where it's not the perfect role for me. I want something else. The company, I've mentioned to the company I wanted a switch to a different thing, but nothing happens, and I'm still performing. So we have the conversation, but it's a bit, let's say, it's not that effective for me. It's not that speedy for me.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely easier if there's a role internally. Go, this is the role that I want to move into. So
Yeah.
I think that it's about facilitating that move, or facilitating how do you sort of have those conversations to see whether the person is suitable or not. I think if there isn't the role, it's a little bit more challenging because, you know, it's not always possible to create the perfect role for somebody. You know, not to say you wouldn't want that if you could, but sometimes it's just not feasible. This one is an interesting case because, you know, if he's unmotivated, it might be performing at the moment, but how long can that last? So, yeah, as you say, when you release this, it will have played out a bit longer and see what the situation is.
Yeah.
But if this person really wants to leave, then I suspect the next thing they'll do is just not turning up to matches or like, which is.
Yeah, so from your perspective, and it's great that you're not, let's say, emotionally attached to this issue. Looking from the sidelines, you think that if you have an unmotivated person in a role, you should somehow either find a role so that it's beneficial both for the company and for the person, or just separate with the person.
No, well, there's definitely the third one, which is what should be business as normal, which is helping the person connect to the mission at hand. So if there's somebody who's in a team, you should be supporting them, trying to understand what they want to achieve. If it's connected to the mission, for them to realize that, and for them to get that sort of motivation and sort of understanding and how it all ties together. So there's effectively the three pieces. One, help a person understand how they add value, how they enjoy where they are at the moment. That's like, you know, probably the ideal one for everybody involved. Then there's the second where it just doesn't tie up. What they're doing at the moment doesn't tie up with the direction that they want to be going in their career, in their life, whatever reason. And so then it should be, in my opinion, a case of, okay, well, let's help you find a role internally that matches what you want and gives you those opportunities. And if at the end of the day you don't have that, then it's probably better for the individual and the company for that person to then find another role externally. And you should definitely try and support them with that, so that you've got those bridges, so that if in the future they come back, they come back. But you know,
yeah, that's important aspect about coming back. But going back to the connecting to the mission aspect, this is let's say a principle or an advice that a lot of leaders receive, connect the person's desires or career goals to the mission of the company, but it is quite on a higher level.
Yeah, to the mission of a team, I was thinking more than the mission of a company. Mission of a company would be ideal. Well, you want it to be the mission of the team and the mission of a company is sort of perfect.
How do you do it on a, let's say, day-to-day basis? Because it's quite big. Big topic to connect things, and it might not be easy for people to do it. So do you have any practices of how do you actually apply this principle in a day-to-day life?
So if you sort of take it from the level of you're trying to make an impact in people's lives, actually, you know, getting that exposure ideally to end customers so that they can actually see people using what you're producing, for you to feel that sort of closed loop. I do something and I'm then having this impact which is positive on this other individual. I think that's very powerful. And I think quite a lot of times, especially in engineering, you can be quite a long way from the customer. And so trying to help bridge that gap and bring things closer so people can actually see people using what they're doing, I think can be very valuable.
To add here something I recall. I don't know whether it was from one of Adam Grant's books regarding this aspect, that if you show the impact you have on people's lives, it will change your motivation. And basically, and it is quite really. I remember we were working with a company that they invested time for the team that developed some software to go where the software is used by people and see their reactions. And yeah, it was a mixed thing. So it was basically, one aspect was, people were happy that their time is that they are doing their job easily with this software, or they might not be happy with something, and you get this feedback, and this feedback is really feeding the people's motivation or desire to work on the product.
It comes back to the value piece, because we're not writing code for the sake of writing code, as an example. We're writing code to have an impact, to produce a product which has a positive impact. So I think sometimes people can just think, I'm here to write this, I've got to write this feature, I've got to do that, rather than, okay, what is the value we're driving to the customer? And actually seeing that value, I think that's where it's very powerful.
Yeah, and I thought of another thing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the working genius model, which is basically, it describes what you mentioned in the beginning, that people have, let's say, natural talent to do something, and this something it brings them energy. So this is, in this model, is called a working genius, and there are aspects that bring you frustrations. And as we've worked with teams, we've seen that teams are not balanced in terms of those roles, basically. So you have a type of work that might be great for one person and not great for the other. And when people don't know what they're skillful at, or what they want to do, they might not rearrange the work in such a way so that people are in the proper seat of the bus. So if you get the metaphor that you used, you might, with the recruitment aspect, or when you form a team, you might get the right people on the bus, but the next question is, who is sitting where? So how, if we form a team, how do you approach this aspect of who is doing what? Because my understanding is that it's great if people self-organize, but I do believe that they need coaching, they need some nudging on some aspects, that there's tendency for people not to self-organize that well.
Yeah, I think you sort of need somebody who sort of steps up into sort of either a formal team leader position or sort of informal team leader position to give it a little bit of that sort of level of support. And you have to be a little bit sensitive or a little bit careful as well, that you don't want to end up with like a team made up of like sub-teams. You want one team in an ideal world that's all working together to fix one problem, or work on one working together to deliver value. Because otherwise you can be in a position where I'm always the database expert, or I'm always the person who writes this or that. And actually that's not really working as a team, that's just working as a bunch of individuals who happen to be working together. So I think that's a bit of an interesting challenge as well.
And when you mention sub-teams, maybe I will switch the topic, but as you're working with leaders who have teams, how do you make sure that all of them work together?
Well, yes, that's an interesting challenge, because you need some division. You need to divide some things up, because otherwise, everything is just, the cognitive load would be just too large. In an ideal world, you'd sort of have that as what I would describe as like a hierarchy of products. Okay. So you would have a big product, and then you would have sub-products at different levels in the hierarchy, so that you can have effectively an area which is delivering a bigger product made up of these sort of team level products. And then from an engineering side, it's sort of Conway's law and trying to work out how can we how can we structure the teams to be able to do that, and the like.
Yeah, but how yeah, the division aspect, yeah, it works great in terms of workload, or how, yeah, you mentioned that people shouldn't think about everything, at least not all people, but then we have this division between people, because
Yep.
they're basically, they have more belonging towards the team they're in.
Yep.
And I think we before we started, we were discussing how to, when we work with leaders, that they tend to think their teams are the ones they are managing or leading, rather than on a, let's say, peer level, or the one above them. So, and I think when we divide people into sub-teams, we tend to lead into this problem that people will not feel the one as a one big team. And I actually think that one of the issues here is leadership teams don't have their goal, the common goal. They are basically, they don't have they're a group of leaders that work on this product, the other is working on that product, and they should work together, but they don't feel as a team.
I think this comes back to the point I made a second ago with regards to the hierarchy of products. Is that if you have products, different teams with different products, but together that grouping of teams are making a product at a higher level, actually you do then have that sort of common goal. What are we trying to achieve together? And I think you're spot on. It's really difficult because it's very easy for people to get very focused on, okay, what is my team doing? What is our bit? And it's, working with them to realize, actually, you can deliver the best system to do X, Y, Z in the world, but if it's, as a company, doesn't align with what we're trying to achieve, then it's actually not useful. It's not the value that we need to. So thinking about it from the level above, how can this area, or how can this group of teams produce the best value for the company within this part of the organization?
Don't you think that the goal, this, let's say, product goal, that we are doing something big, is too big for the leaders of those different teams to feel that they have a common goal? Because,
well, I think that's to do with the level of leadership above them, to be able to work with that level to actually, this is what we as a group of teams are trying to achieve, and you're working on these sub products within that sort of overarching product and goal. But yeah, you definitely need somebody who's maybe it's the leader of those product managers or team leaders who are building that. Okay, what is our vision, direction for this part of the organization?
Yeah, I remember reading Hit Refresh, the book from Satya Nadella, who was basically, when he took the role of a CEO at Microsoft, he had the issue that there are a group of different divisions, and the managers are not feeling as a team, and one of the first aspects was actually to build this level on the senior management level. And yeah, I think this is a point where people should really focus that on each level of hierarchy that we might have, we should make sure we should put a lot of emphasis on building this peer level as a team, and have a lot of effort. And I think this is the case, that a lot of companies don't actually invest even the time for these people to work on something together. Rather, it's only some, let's say, sync meetings once every week just to catch up on the operational aspect. And I think what you mentioned regarding one-on-ones, that you should have some operational one-on-ones and non-operational one-on-ones, I think the same is on the leadership level as well, that you might have operational synchronizational meetings and non-operational aspects as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's also another piece, which is, we were talking about one-to-ones, which tend to be vertical, as in terms of a team lead to somebody that reports them. But when you're trying to build that leadership team, actually horizontal one-to-ones as well, as in terms of you having conversations with the person of the same role as you, but maybe in a different neighboring department or the like.
And do you do horizontal one-on-ones?
Yep. Yeah.
And are they operational, or do you have, again, this non-operational aspect?
They tend to be They tend to be less operational because of the hierarchy of products. Challenges tend to be more your area, and so they probably have a more natural split of, I don't know, let's say 50-50, 50% operational stuff, 50% not operational stuff. So that works quite well, actually.
I think this is a great practice. I haven't seen that much done. I've seen a lot of peers on a management level, let's say, go out for lunch, and it happens naturally to have those conversations, but usually it is with people you like from the management team. It's not with all. And this cross one-on-ones on a peer level, I think it's great, and it could be applied even in teams when they in this remote environment. Maybe if we map it to the remote environment, I don't think currently people in teams are doing one-on-ones on a peer level.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it depends on the company culture. Yeah.
And I think this could be, let's say, one way to balance the aspect of not working together.
Just going back to your point from a second ago, is that people are having, you mentioned that people are having lunch with people that they like, and this is an interesting one, because it's exactly the people that you are not having lunch with, which are the people that you need the one-to-one to build those connections and to build that common understanding and the like. So.
And how do you nudge people to do that? Because I think this is the real issue, that people don't see the any value in doing those one-on-ones with people that are in different department, different team, and even if they don't, and moreover, they don't like them.
That's an interesting question, because nothing that is sort of enforced. But I have like one-to-ones with people at sort of my level. I know my bosses, like, and the people who work for me also have sort of one-to-ones at their level as well. So I think it's I think they must, either they see value in it or they feel that they should do it. But I actually, it's never been dictated. It's been one of those things that has sort of organically happened over time.
So again, when you show that you're doing it, people will follow it. This is
yeah, but I actually don't. I think in this case, I don't think anybody would actually know that was happening, apart from like the odd comment, or when I speak to such and such, or because it's not like you see two people sat in a meeting room at the moment. So I think it happens a little bit more because they see value in it. Hopefully, yeah.
Okay, Richard. The podcast has two main aspects. I think I didn't mention it before we started. One is to explore a particular topic. So we talked about the aspect of roles and psychological safety, about giving people the chance to change roles. And the second aspect is what's currently on our mind. So whether it's personal or professional, do you have a topic that is
what's on our minds?
What's on our mind? Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping when this is released in September, less of coronavirus, but I think there's definitely a piece on, what does the sort of future of work sort of look like? I think from my perspective, the worst situation we can get into is where you have mixed both online and in-person teams. And what I mean by that is like at the same time. I think you can have a team that works together like 2 days a week, 3 days a week, and then works remotely 2 days a week, 3 days a week. I think that's fine. I think that's actually got some advantages.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the challenges you could have is probably less of an issue if somebody wants to work in the office full time. I think that's actually, they can act like they're at home,
Mm-hmm.
like joining a meeting like this. I think the issue becomes, for those people who want to stay working from home, that's going to be a big challenge for the teams. How do you accommodate that? Because effectively everybody then has to act like they're at home. So I think that's an interesting challenge for the future. How does the future of work sort of look as we come out of the pandemic? How do we build those connections again? Because there is, I don't know what the stats are, but there must be so many people who have joined companies and have never met any colleagues.
Oh yeah.
Some of them have probably even joined a company, worked for a year, and then left the company and never met the colleagues the entire time there. So how do we build those sort of social connections again? How do we all do this in a situation where we're going back to the office one week, and then the next week it's like coronavirus is back, so we're not going back to the office the week after. How do we deal with sort of in, out? So I think these are really some of the challenges that we're going to face.
I've seen one approach recently from Dropbox. I don't know if you've seen the articles. They are starting to use a different word rather than office. They start using the word studios. And I think it was studios, and that they are restructuring their offices in such a way so that when teams decide to go and have a meeting or whatever, as you mentioned, working together at the office, to be able to do so easily. Another aspect I've seen is with LinkedIn as an organization, that I think it was with LinkedIn that they've basically delegated the synchronization to the team level. So you decide how to build those connections, how to work effectively, and so on. And I think, from my perspective, and what we are actually doing, maybe it's I'm a bit biased, but I think teams should learn how to synchronize faster, how to align on those aspects, how to get out of unclear situation or changing situations. Because currently it could be, let's meet at the office at Monday and Tuesday, and then what happens when you have a lockdown? Again, it will be a change, and people should be able to cope with this change faster. And I think with the social aspect, it will never be the same to actually meet in a physical environment, but it's more effort. And I think there are a lot of we actually have this experience already. I think there are a lot of companies first who have been remote only for the past 15 years. So there is the experience that we should copy. Also, there are a lot of companies that are working in such a model that you have teams in one country and teams in another country, and they consider it as a one team, but they're actually not a one team. And we already have the practices about, let's work, let's say, two people go on a working assignment in the other country, so that you actually make those social connections.
Yep.
But it will be difficult. I think the difficult aspect is that it happens to everyone and to all companies, not by choice. And I think this will be part of the skill set that individually should be developed. And this is something that will be in transition, how to work as a team in such place, in such an environment. And we had a recording with Vesi Tasheva regarding diversity and inclusion. I don't think we covered the topic with her, and we haven't released the episode yet, but she mentioned that you might have issues that people are not inclusive to others that want to work from home. So we will have another aspect of non-inclusion and non-belonging. Why you don't want to come at the office on Monday when we are all together?
Yeah, I think you would really struggle to have somebody working full. Well, maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's much easier to have a team fully working from home, or a team that sort of coordinates when they're in the office. I think having somebody who in that team is working fully remotely, you probably want to think about how to maybe move them into a team that is fully remote, or I don't know. Anyway, I think these are some of the interesting challenges that sort of the next 6 months will bring up. Maybe we come up with some interesting novel solutions. But
do you have any ideas that you're going to try out in the next few months regarding this topic?
Some of the challenges that we've had historically have been about people working in different countries, working together. And you end up basically defaulting to you act like you're working from home, as in terms of every person joins from their laptop, every person joins with their own headphones. But that to me is missing the piece that you were talking about a second ago with regard to like the studios and like, is the office is a tool. The office is there to be useful. And so how do you make the best value? How do you make the best use of that? And there's an interesting book with regard to how Automatic Works, who developed WordPress. And the book spends a lot of time focusing on how we work when we're together. For a company that's supposed to be like fully remote, the book really highlights the importance of spending time together, working on problems together, and then going off and then maybe writing sort of that deeper sort of those solutions and the like. So I think,
I don't recall where I think I listened to a podcast where what happened with studios, film studios and television studios that have to develop TV series or movies. I think it was from the podcast Taken for Granted with Adam Grant, and it was with, I don't recall who was, J.J. Abrams, I think was the guest, and he mentioned that it's really quite difficult to come up with ideas to create a new movie or to make a script for a new episode of a certain TV series. But the upside was that they changed the tools. So I think what happens naturally when we transition from one phase of collaboration to another phase of collaboration is that we keep the necessary aspect about how to connect, how to work efficiently together, to exchange ideas and so on. But we change the tools. And I think we currently don't have that much tools. Currently, it's great that I can make a podcast with you where you're in the UK and I'm in Bulgaria. So it's not a difficulty. In the past, it wouldn't be that easy, probably. And I think if we take the positivity that you mentioned, in every situation, we might come up with the tools regarding this collaboration. And it will have a lot of experimentation as well. But yeah, it's again, I think it's natural for people to have this desire to come together, and even I'm wondering what has something actually changed, because there are people when they are physically present in a meeting where a team should come up with ideas, but they are actually not there and not active. Would it matter that much?
Yeah.
If they are there or working from home and not being active from home.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting. There's a couple of interesting points you're sort of touching on there, which is the first one of, if you're not actually engaged in a meeting, you should probably not be in the meeting in the first place. But there's another one, which is a more subtle point, which is with regard to different ways that people think, as in terms of extroversion versus introversion, and somebody who's sat there who you might not think is engaged, actually could be super engaged, thinking about things. And then, during that meeting, they might not say very much, but sometimes those people have the most profound insights, and one sentence from them can be more than like 20 minutes from somebody else.
Totally,
so I think that's a really
totally agree. And touching on that point, there was I think Susan Cain, was it that she's a leading person regarding introversion, extroversion, and one aspect is that, let's say, offices are built for more extroverted people, and another aspect is also that let's say solitude leads to better inventions. So if you have an introverted person thinking about a problem alone at home, it might be you might get better results, and there is different research that shows different data regarding whether it's better to be at the office or not. So regarding the creativity aspect or the collaboration aspect, it might be better to work from home. Regarding the social connections and psychological safety, building this trust environment, it's quite difficult to do it.
I think with regard to the collaboration you were just talking about, I think you want to be looking, even working from home, working from the office, you should definitely think about how do we structure things to get the best from both introverts and extroverts. So how do you have those discussions, collaborations, so you can get sort of all of the benefits rather than just a certain subset of people?
And I think this is a question that should have been quite important before we had the pandemic.
Yes, I don't know. It's completely unrelated to the current situation.
Yeah. But I think that the important aspect is that the current situation puts emphasis on some of the questions that should have been with emphasis before that. And because before the pandemic, you had a lot of issues about we shouldn't have this meeting should have been an email and so on. Yes. And I think now more people are willing to say, I don't want to join this meeting, and there is more acceptance about this, that it's too much meetings over Zoom and so on. And now you have the opportunity to change the way. But yeah, I think that the questions really are there. The questions are the same, the problems are the same, the solutions or the tools should be different. Okay, Richard, if you have other topic in mind to discuss, or if you think it's a good way to end, just say. This is, as I mentioned beforehand, it's an open-ended talk.
Open-ended talk. Well, I did say that I had no meetings after. I think there's an interesting one that you were just talking about a second ago, which is with regard to that split between meetings, emails, live action work, and hopefully, we should always be sort of challenging ourselves. Is this the right way to do things? And hopefully, one of the benefits that might have come from the pandemic is that we do review these things and see whether actually what we were doing was the right thing for us as an organization or for the like. So
yeah, for me this question really is quite important. And when we, for example, when we work with teams and we see a lot of common issues, and for example the biggest issue for me is that teams don't have if they don't have an answer to the question, how do you decide as a team? How do you make decisions as a team? And whatever the problem teams have, now we try to teach them that they should experiment as a team, that should try first to fix the problem, as we already discussed, to look what's the problem, then to come up with a solution. But whatever the solution they have is to try it out in an experimental way. So to be in a time-boxed way and to measure it. And I think with the pandemic and all those new problems, what's effective, whether we should have the video on or off, whether we should have a meeting or not, and so on and so on. If we learn as a team how to try out those solutions, this will lead, I think, to the benefits, whatever the problem we have. And based on my experience in the past year and a half, we as a team, we started in 2016, and we didn't have an office. And I recently shared one article I wrote in 2016, is that we have a nomad office, and that people are questioning our approach that we don't have an office. And I mentioned that nowadays nobody questions this approach because it's a natural thing. But the idea is that we decided when to be together, when to have online meeting, when to work. I think this is something very rarely happens. When to have a day or a slot in the day where you actually work alone and there is no collaboration, and you're just focused on your tasks. And those approaches, again, they are not new, and I think teams should evaluate a lot of aspects, what's working for them and what's not. And there is a lot of research that there is no silver bullet, but it's based on context. But yeah, I think if we train this skill of experimenting as a team, it will work, whatever the problem.
And there's definitely different. I think we sometimes think of problems as being like singular. There's always problem solution. You get things like the Connecting framework, which has like the different options of like simple, complex, complicated, chaos, and through conversations they move from one sector into another. And so when you're on one side of that, and it is chaos as an example, then actually having a more active collaboration might be useful. But when you've worked on that problem enough to get it to a position where actually I can go home and I can just go and write code for the next day and I know what I'm doing. So I think, that's a good sort of piece to think about. Not everything is the same. And even if you think it's in a position, it's actually changing. The more you're working on it, you're actually impacting whether working together, collaboration, or whether being at home a bit more sort of focused is the right thing to do.
Yeah. And I think, in the past, even with the open office approach that was thought of it would trigger more collaboration, and it had, at least there was a lot of research that it had a negative impact on collaboration. I think it will always be, let's say, a rhythm between working together, working alone, working together, working alone. And here nowadays we'll have the issue who is together and who is not. And it will have the belonging aspect, the inclusion aspect that will be difficult, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking what our current focus is, or what, as I don't know if you know what Radiotochka is. The name of the podcast is Radiotochka 2, and it is a play of words from Tochka to the company and Radiotochka. Radiotochka was a Soviet or communist historical, let's say, item. Everyone in their homes had one radio station that was physical, and it had one radio.
That was it.
That was it, and it was called Radiotochka. And the joke is what we are, on what frequencies we are. And I was thinking what's the current state, and I think a lot of IT people currently are on vacation. I think you're also planning you mentioned you're planning a vacation after the isolation you had in the UK.
Yeah.
Because I see a lower response in LinkedIn, in various events, in working with clients. The response rate is quite slow. So August seems to be a non-existent work month.
And then you've got all the bank holidays in September when you get back. So
for Bulgaria, yeah.
September's quite nice in Bulgaria. So
yeah. So yeah, I think currently on my side, I was thinking about the next 2 weeks, which I'm working as well, and then we'll have only 1 week holiday because I already had a few weeks holiday during the summer. One aspect that I want to mention in this episode is we're continuing to develop our platform softskillspills.com, where we try to put various useful materials on soft skills and teamwork topics. And I think as we do the first episode in English and the platform is in English, I think we will put some excerpts from the podcast. Hopefully we shared something useful, and we can put it there as well, but we'll see. So thank you very much for joining the podcast, and to do it on short notice because we arranged quite quickly to do the recording. I will definitely share with you when we're live and when the episode is released. So thanks for sharing your thoughts on.
Thank you for the invite. It was good to chat to you.
Yeah, thanks. And there is a tradition. I'll put my voice in a more bass mode to end the episode. And I'm struggling how to do it in English. Okay. You are listening to Radiotochka 2 with me, Harry, without Vasi, who is on a maternity leave, and with Richard Haywood.